Good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name's Stuart Cornish. I am the voluntary safeguarding advisor for the Steve Sinnott Foundation. So, as I said, my name's Stuart Cornish. I'm a safeguarding consultant. I have my own company, which is Safeguarding for All, but that's only been set up for about a year. I've got 17 years experience in the police. And I've done a wide range of safeguarding roles. So they've included online offending against children, child sexual exploitation. I'm currently a champion for child criminal exploitation, which is probably better known as county lines kind of criminality. I've worked in domestic abuse, safeguarding adults at risk, and my last role in the police was working in a homicide unit. During my time, I've worked with a number of outside agencies. That's including the National Crime Agency, which was previously known as CEOP, the Internet Watch Foundation, which is another charity which deals with removing child abuse material from the internet. I've worked with local safeguarding boards, and internationally I've worked with NECMEC, which is the National Children Missing and Exploited Children's, and Interpol. So that's what I've done in the police. Now I'm working for a national sports governing body as a safeguarding case officer. And as I said, I'm also the volunteer safeguarding advisor for the Steve Sinnott Foundation. So I've been working in safeguarding for quite a while. It's quite a passion of mine, and it's why I've moved from the police to go and do it in a sporting arena to protect children when they get involved in football. So, course content today. This was one of the hardest courses I ever wrote, because safeguarding is so big at the moment. There's so many different strands to it. It would be easy to do this and have you sitting here for the next 4 hours. But what I've done is it's, for want of a better phrase, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour about what is safeguarding, what do we mean by it, the 6 safeguarding principles that we use. Now, these 6 safeguarding principles I'll go into a little bit further, but they have been put together for adults at risk, vulnerable adults safeguarding. However, they do cover children and young persons as well. I'll go through some definitions, what we mean by what the definitions are in relation to safeguarding, because definitions in law can change depending on what legislation you're looking at. So we'll be looking specifically today at safeguarding definitions. We'll look at safeguarding in the media, which will cover reports, inquiries, and major case reviews. Just a little warning that when we do that, there are a number of cases that are quite will bring some emotion to the presentation. They are quite horrible cases, and they're probably cases that everybody knows and has a rough understanding of, but it's more about the impact those cases had on safeguarding rather than the cases themselves. We'll look at information sharing, which is vitally important in my role, and that's usually information sharing between statutory agencies, police, national governing bodies, social workers, probation, all the types of people that would involve in these kind of investigations. And then I'll go on to additional help and guidance. And as Anne said, she'll put some contact details in the chat. And if anyone has a question, a safeguarding concern or anything, please feel free to contact me. So the measurable outcomes for today is, by the end of the sessions, everyone here should be able to define the term safeguarding and other subject related terms. You'll be able to list the different categories of abuse, will be aware of your responsibilities to report concerns and share information, will recognise the importance of safeguarding, having discussed high-profile media cases, and will be able to identify who to report these concerns to. This is, as I say, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So what will happen is, if you do work in an industry that involves children or adults at risk, these are people that you would have to go and find out. So we would say to you, contact your designated safeguarding officer. So each business or each company would have their own designated safeguarding officer. So that's the person who you would put your concerns to. So what do we mean by safeguarding? Safeguarding is what we do for all children. Child protection is what we do for children who have been harmed or at significant risk of harm. So child protection, you'll usually hear in the sort of arena of police or social services or someone like that, where they've already been involved, they've already had a referral or some kind of allegation. So that's where the child protection side of it sits. Safeguarding is what we do before then. It's what we do to make sure that everyone involved, all the children or adults at risk that are involved in any activity, are protected and can do that activity free from harm, safely, and basically have fun. So if it's football or if it's in a school or something like that, each child should be protected and have that sort of barrier to any abuse. So definitions. So we would consider safeguarding, as I said, it's something that happens before there's an allegation. It's put in place to protect anyone involved in any activities. And it means, it's quite simple. It means keeping people safe from harm, abuse, or neglect. Abuse is when someone does something to a person that can cause harm. It can be emotional and or physical harm. And neglect is when someone is not given the care and support that they need to live their life. And this can also include self-neglect. Everyone working with children, young people, and adults at risk must take responsible steps to ensure that risks to their welfare are minimised. When concerns are raised, all parties involved must take appropriate action. This is quite a big thing, especially in the sporting environment where I'm working now, is that trying to get across to people that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, whether you are serving the tea, whether you are working in the kiosk, whether you are just acting as someone, pointing someone in the right direction, someone who's there to help people with the logistics of a sporting event. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So we try to push it out so that people understand that, and that's quite important, because sometimes it's not the safeguarding officer or the welfare officer that's there at the point. It's safeguarding needs to be policed by everyone involved in that activity. So abuse and neglect are forms of maltreatment of a child. So as I go through this, it might say child or adults at risk, but these definitions and these principles that can be transferred to either set of participants. So somebody may abuse or neglect a child by inflicting harm or failing to act to prevent harm. So from the Working Together 2015, which is some legislation that we have in the UK, it states that children may be abused in the family or in an institutional or community setting by those known to them, or more rarely by others, e.g. via the internet. They may be abused by an adult or adults or another child or children. So that's what that piece of legislation says. When we come to defining a child, working in law enforcement, depending on what legislation you use, as I said earlier, a child is defined under 16, under 18, it varies. However, for the purpose of safeguarding, a child is anyone who has not reached their 18th birthday. and that comes from the Children's Act 1989 and the subsequent amendment to that act in 2004. It also stipulates that even if a child has reached 16 years of age, is living independently, or is in further education, is a member of the armed forces, in hospital or custody in a secure estate for children and young people, that does not change their status of still being a child and still being protected by safeguarding legislation. Although unborn children are not included in the definition of children, intervention to ensure their future well-being is encompassed within safeguarding children practice. So that is a loophole in the legislation, but the practice does cover unborn children. An adult at risk, the definition of this comes from the Care Act 2014. Up until about a year ago, it was defined as a vulnerable adult, but that's been changed. That title has now been changed to an adult at risk. And the definition for this is a person aged 18 or over and at risk of abuse or neglect because of their needs for care and support. This person does not need to be receiving any particular service in order for the safeguarding duties to apply. And that's where it comes to self-neglect as well. That covers that point of self-neglect. So if you have somebody who is an adult at risk, who is struggling to look after themselves, who is struggling with some sort of mental health issue, they can also come under this definition of adults at risk. They don't have to be under any care of any services. So the categories of abuse, there is a slight difference between children and adults at risk, and you'll see that in a sec. But so the categories of abuse for children, it's physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. For adults, it can be physical, domestic violence and abuse, sexual, psychological, financial or material, modern slavery, discriminatory, and neglect and acts of omission and self-neglect. When I worked for the adults at risk safeguarding, the main one we saw was financial abuse of adults at risk. So the abuse was being committed by carers or family members, and also neglect was another one that was quite big when it comes to adults. With children, it's pretty much split amongst the four: physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. So the context of some of this crime, of some of these categories of abuse, are sort of like make crime, fake friends, fabricated induced illness, which used to be called Munchausen by proxy. We've got honor-based violence, forced marriages, missing, exploited, and trafficked people, female genital mutilation, hate crime, professional and cyber abuse, and extremism. So we won't touch much on extremism today, but that again is another evolving sort of part of safeguarding, and that sits very closely with online. So you're talking about vulnerable people online being taken in by extremist groups and having their ideology changed really into one of these sort of extremist or right-wing groups. So the 6 safeguarding principles. As I said earlier, these 6 principles were originally produced for the safeguarding of adults, but can also be applied to children. They're quite good. So if I bring each one of these up, I'll give everyone a few minutes just to read through them rather than have me droning on about them. So if I just leave you a few minutes just to read through those, and then I'll go to the next page, which has got the next 3 on. if anybody has any questions about these, please put them in the chat, and we'll sort of send them my way. I'm just going to go on to the next ones. So as you're reading them, you can see how they relate to both adults at risk and children, and they're principles that cut through all of child protection, safeguarding, everything to do with what we're looking at today. So this is what I was saying earlier about safeguarding. Safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, and it's something that we're pushing from my work at the moment. And it's very important, because it's like policing. It doesn't work without the help of the people that are there, the people that are at the coalface, the people that are helping out in clubs, helping out in schools, working in these places. So everyone needs to understand that although they might not be a designated safeguarding officer, or they might not be a welfare officer, they do have a responsibility to report any concerns they have. So the first is promoting the health and welfare of children and adults at risk. The second being protecting children and adults at risk from harm. So safeguarding in the media. Safeguarding has been in the media quite recently, actually, and I don't know if anyone's aware of it, but there is a report that was produced by the Football Association in the UK, and it's called the Sheldon Report, and it was a report that was produced by the FA to look at non-recent sexual abuse in football. The date range was from 1975 to 2005, and it came about on the back of a number of disclosures from children and ex-players, and the main protagonist of this was a gentleman by the name of Barry Bennell. So that was released, I think, last week or maybe the week before, and as we say, there's been lots of safeguarding, serious case reviews and inquiries, but the good thing that come out of this report is to say that the FA, after having these initial incidents reported to them, has put in position a safeguarding team which now looks after this, and this is for non-recent abuse. But if we go back a few years, we've got a number of cases which were quite instrumental in forming the safeguarding legislation and practices that we have at the moment. Now, this one is one of the most horrific cases that even as a police officer I ever read about or came to know, and it was the murder of Victoria Colombier. Now, Victoria was born in 2nd November 1991 and was murdered on the 25th of February 2000. She was tortured and murdered by her great aunt and her great aunt's boyfriend. Her death led to a public inquiry and produced major changes in child protection policies. And I'll read this to you. This was quite damning. This was from the opening statement in the inquiry from Neil Garham QC. And he listed no fewer than 12 key occasions when he said that relevant services had the opportunity to successfully intervene in the life of Victoria. As evidence to the inquiry unfolded, several other opportunities emerged. None of these required any great skill or would have made heavy demands on time to take some form of action. Sometimes it needed nothing more than a manager doing their job by asking pertinent questions or taking the trouble to look in a case file. There can be no excuse for such sloppy and unprofessional performance. And you'll see the trend here that, and it's very sad that legislation only tends to get changed when a child is harmed or is killed. So it is very sad. And out of that case came the Lambing report. And in particular, this report illustrated the failures in communication and information sharing between agencies. Now, this was a problem that was been going on for many, many decades. Everybody had their own little empires and nobody wanted to share information, whether it was the police, social services, probation, prisons. Different police forces didn't even talk to each other and share information. So what this report basically says was the lessons learned from this and other cases has strengthened the legal framework for safeguarding. It now fully supports staff in creating a safer environment. People were scared to share information. People only like to share information if it's a criminal conviction or something that's actually specific. If it's just intelligence or an allegation, people were very, very wary of sharing that kind of information because you were innocent until proven guilty, obviously, and you also had data protection and stuff like that, which we'll come on to. And this report basically is saying that the information sharing must be your #1 priority to make sure that people who abuse children and children that are the victims of this abuse, this information is shared amongst other agencies who can help protect that child. Second case today is the Soham murders. Again, a horrific case. And this was the murders of two 10-year-old girls, which occurred in Soham in Cambridgeshire in August 2002. The victims, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, were lured into the home of a local resident, Ian Huntley, who subsequently murdered both girls. Now, this is quite a famous picture of both of these girls, and again, this was another horrific case of somebody who knew them, who worked in the school, who had previously been the subject of allegations, and that information wasn't shared. And when Huntley went to apply for a job as caretaker here, none of the information of his previous offending behaviour, although he hadn't been convicted of it, but there was a pattern of behaviour from him, none of it was known to his new employers. So if we work down, from this came the Bitchard inquiry in 2004. It was commissioned by the government following Huntley's conviction of the murder of Holly and Jessica. As it says here, Huntley worked as a caretaker at the school both girls attended. Although Huntley was vetted for the post, including police checks, this failed to identify previous allegations of sexual offences and serious incidents between 1995 and 1999 in two different geographical areas. It's shocking to think that back in 2002, the UK police did not share intelligence and information with each other when it came to people that were suspected of committing sexual offences or abuse offences against children. So out of the Bitchard report, there were a number of key considerations, and these are still all in place. And again, legislation seems to only change for the best off the back of a horrific offence against children, which is very sad, but it just seems to be the way it is. The serious case reviews seems to look at the mistakes that are made, and a lot of the time the mistakes that were made could have been prevented with a little bit of effort. So the key considerations here were a registration scheme for all people wishing to work with children or vulnerable people. There was an introduction of a national police intelligence system for England and Wales. This means that if you work in the Metropolitan Police, which is the police that cover London, and you put a name of somebody into that system, it will bring up any intelligence. Doesn't even have to be a conviction, any intelligence anywhere in the country, which is really good. It also said that there was to be a clear code of practice for all police forces for record keeping and sharing data. Training for head teachers and governors on how to interview, ensuring that people are employed according to safeguarding rules. The only thing I have about that is that the school who employed Huntley did everything that they should have done. It was the failures on the behalf of the police in that case which caused this. A guidance for social services on when they should refer cases involving underage sex to the police. And the main thing to come from the Bitchard report is CRB or DBS checks, making it possible to check each person for any previous crimes. Now, just to explain what a DBS check is, over here in the UK and in the job I do, if someone wants to be involved in football and work with children, or work with children in any, but I'll just from my own job, they have to submit a DBS to us. And we review that DBS and we make a decision on what's on that DBS as to whether that person should be allowed to work in football. And it's the same with anything else. It's the same with youth clubs, with schools, with any sport, with scouts, anything like that. If you want to work with children, then you have to complete a DBS. DBS as well has two parts to it. It has convictions. So it tells us all of the convictions that people have had. But there is another box where the chief constable of any police force can put intelligence in there if they believe that it is pertinent to someone being involved in the child workforce. So it's very, very good. And it has stopped a lot of unsavoury people from taking up employment in the child workforce. This is another one. This is to do with adults at risk as well, and just generally adults. This was the Staffordshire Hospital. This is not as sort of high profile as the other two cases, but it is very, very, very important. This found that the failings at Staffordshire Hospital are considered one of the biggest scandals in the history of the NHS, with years of abuse and neglect at the hospital leading to unnecessary deaths of hundreds of patients. I've read the report of this, and they actually say at one point there was a receptionist in Staffordshire Hospital who was diagnosing people who came in, wasn't even sending them to a doctor. So in 2009, a report by the Healthcare Commission laid bare the problems at Stafford, which was run by the Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust. The regulator condemned appalling standards of care and reported there had been at least 400 more deaths than expected in this hospital between 2005 and 2008. A statistic which is absolutely unbelievable. So again, another safeguarding failure. There are other ones that we can see. There's Baby P, there's Daniel Pelka. There are so many failings. They are becoming more few and far between, thankfully. But again, we need to keep on top of it, because we certainly don't want another Victoria or another Holly and Jessica, just to change some legislation. One of the main issues with safeguarding, and this came out of the Bitchard report, was information sharing. The reluctance of professional bodies, statutory agencies, or anyone really to share information for fear of being sued, for fear of maybe feeling like they're condemning someone before they're even found guilty in a court of law. But it's imperative. It's so important to get this information between agencies. So now we have a practice and a standard that we use when it comes to sharing information, and that's been updated recently with GDPR. It used to be data protection, it's now GDPR, so that's where we are. So keeping children and adults at risk safe from harm requires professionals and others to share information. And the best way to think about this is it's just like a jigsaw. It's like any investigation you do. You just put the pieces together, and that one piece of information that you share from a range of sources may just push a statutory agency into a position where they can take some action. So that's the best way to look at it. No matter how small you think a piece of information is or anything like that, you need to share that. You need to get that to the correct statutory agency. You need to get it to your correct line manager, and make sure that we continue to do this. We continue to protect children and safeguard adults at risk. So the 7 golden rules of information sharing. The first one for me is probably the most important, is to remember that the Data Protection Act and GDPR in the United Kingdom is not a barrier to sharing information. People are absolutely petrified of this. It's not a barrier to share information. It says how you can share information, for what reasons you can share information, and how that information can be presented, but it doesn't say you cannot share it. Whenever we share information, we must be open and we must be honest. If you have any doubts or any problems with sharing information, then seek advice. You know, ask people, ask line managers, ask me. That's what I'm here for. Someone who can help you with that. Share with consent where appropriate, but if you don't have that consent, you can still share information. Consider safety and well-being. Information that you share, again, must be necessary, proportionate, relevant, accurate, timely, and secure. And you also must keep a record of any decision that you make in order to share information. And lastly, and I've put it here, and I've put it sort of in sort of bold and a bigger font, and it's quite important that if any of you come up against barriers to sharing information, then just escalate it to a line manager or take further advice. Because there's a slide that's coming up where you'll see, and it's very important. I'll just go to it actually. Hold on. This one. This one's really important. And this is what you should always think when you're sharing information. Is don't think, what if I'm wrong? Think, what if I'm right? You know, you need to think that. If you're wrong, that's fine. It's not, I'm just trying to go back, sorry. It's not important if you're wrong. No one's going to get in trouble. No one's going to get, I nearly said stuck on them, because that's what used to happen when we were in the police if we got in trouble. So no one gets in trouble. No one's going to have a go at you. No one's going to say anything. If you're wrong, you're wrong. But imagine how you'd feel if you didn't share that information and you were right. That's where the problem comes. So if in doubt, just share it. Make sure you share it properly, but just share it. So confidentiality. This is another barrier to sharing information. And it says the person's right to confidentiality is not absolute and may be overridden. Where there is evidence that sharing information is necessary in exceptional cases to prevent serious crime, danger to a person's life, danger to others, danger to the community, or danger to the health of a person. Remember, a child and or adult at risk's needs are paramount. So these five points here pretty much cover everything. And you can always find one of these to go under when you're sharing information. So how do we share information, and how do we share safeguarding concerns? It's quite easy, really. you just need to write down what you've seen or what you've heard, when that happened, who that was from, and where it happened, what your worry or concern is, how you responded at the time, what you've done since, and always ask yourself the question, what more do I need to do? As I said, sharing information, you just make a decision to share that information, but record that decision. Record why you've done it, record what you've seen, record what your concerns are. And that way, if you need to refer back to it at a later date, you've got all that information there. And people can't criticize you then with hindsight and say, well, none of these matched. Well, you know, I had a concern. It's not evidence, it's not information, it's just a concern. And I wanted to bring that concern to the relevant people. And that's what we do with when we're sharing those concerns. We need to speak up. It's absolutely vital that we speak up when we come across any concerns we have. And most institutions and most businesses and most governing bodies have a whistleblowing policy written into their safeguarding procedures. And again, it's your choice who you talk to. You can talk to a designated safeguarding leader, a safeguarding officer. You can use your line manager. You can speak to a senior manager of your choice. Sometimes your line manager, your direct line manager might not be the right person, or maybe the concern is about them. So you can go around them and go to somebody else. A trade union representative, human resources advisor, or a director or a non-executive director of a trust. And again, as I say, if you go to one and your safeguarding concern is not taken seriously, or you don't feel that it's being addressed properly, you elevate it, you escalate it up to the next level. And of course, any of these come with the sort of caveat that if it is if it's an immediate risk, then it's the police. An immediate risk, don't talk to a line manager, don't talk to a trade union representative. You report that concern straight to the authorities. So what do we do if we are concerned? So if you do have a concern that a child or an adult at risk of abuse or neglect, you have a responsibility to act. These concerns will be addressed through local multi-agency safeguarding procedures once a referral has been made. Have a discussion with your line manager, or again, somebody on the list from the previous slide. You can contact your designated safeguarding lead or safeguarding team for advice or support, or you can make a referral by contacting children's or adult services. But again, document your concerns, escalate if you're not being taken seriously, and any immediate risk or serious risk of harm to a child or an adult at risk has got to be reported straight into the police or authorities. That's the thing, just report it. As I say, if you're wrong, doesn't matter, not in the slightest. Nobody's going to come back and criticize anyone. And again, we go back, we've come back all the way around to this slide. Don't think, what if I'm wrong? Think, what if I'm right? The fault of not reporting something and something happening to that child or adult at risk, and you knowing that you had that knowledge before that incident occurred, or that serious harm had occurred, I mean, you then have to sort of not only live with that on a personal level, but you may be asked to explain why that concern wasn't raised. You know, you will never get in trouble for raising a concern that is deemed to be unsubstantiated. However, you will if you do not raise a concern and something happens. So additional help and guidance. I've put a few slides on, I've put a few organisations on here that can help and stuff like that. But the best help is Google, and that's really, really safeguarding comes in all shapes and sizes, and each safeguarding concern for each different industry has their own policies and procedures. So if you do have an issue with anything and it doesn't fit one of these sort of charities or something that I'm not going to show you, just Google it and they will come up, whether it is safeguarding concerns for a sport, for the Scouts, for the church, you know, there'll be something on there, and it's so high profile at the moment, you'll be able to find it. So the legislation we go by is quite a lot, and it gets changed and updated mostly after serious case reviews or a sort of an independent review commissioned by a governing body or something. But we use adults legislation, so we use the Care Act 2014. For local guidance, you can use the adult safeguarding boards. For children's legislation, we use the Children Act 1989 and the 2004 Adoption Act, and the updated Children's Act of 2002. We use the Sexual Offences Act, which is having used that for a number of years, a superb bit of legislation. It covers absolutely everything, and it distinguishes between positions of trust, positions of responsibility, familial abuse. It covers absolutely everything. It is a really good piece of kit, especially for people in safeguarding or in the police. Working Together 2015, but then we have local guidance. You have your local Safeguarding Children's Board, which again will come under the local government, and it's probably closely aligned with the Adult Safeguarding Board. And all children and adults have the right to live a life free from harm and abuse, and that's really important. And that's where that's what we're looking to get to that point. So we do have loads of help out there. As I was saying before, lots and lots of help, lots and lots of experts. So we're talking about NSPCC. If you ever need, excuse me, if you ever need to look up safeguarding policies, safeguarding documents, trainings, anything like that, NSPCC is absolutely brilliant. Them and Bernardo's are really good. We have safeguarding in children's mental health. We have the IWF, which is the Internet Watch Foundation. As I said, they were mentioned earlier. They're a charity that deal with removing child sexual abuse material from the internet. Samaritans, Victim Support, Childline, Refuge Against Domestic Violence. There's the Broken Rainbow UK, which is an LGBT domestic violence charity. They are very good. Again, drug abuse. That's something we haven't really spoke about today, but that's ACT. That is the counter-terrorism stuff that the government put out. And again, another mental health charity. So we do have a lot of people out there, and there are, as I say, there are so many charities out there. There are so many people doing lots of good things, and anyone you find in safeguarding will always be willing to help, whether it's female genital mutilation or something that you don't see every day, something that you come across while you're at work that you think, that's a bit strange. I've never known that kind of abuse or that kind of safeguarding concern before. Put it into Google, someone will be there and someone will help you. And if they're a safeguarding officer, they will be more than happy to help you. As I said, it is a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. If I don't know the answers, I'll be honest and say I don't know the answers, and I'll come back to Anne and we will get the questions over to you, the answers to your questions back to you as soon as we can.